Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah Shir. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav, and we will be learning today Miras Hashem Daf Kuf Lamed Beis Amid Beis. We pick up today on the bottom of Kuf Lamed Beis Amid Aleph with a brand new Siman Tafresh Samach Seder. Right? Hold on 1 second. Yes. Siman Tafresh Samach Seder Hekef Habima Ubay Gimel Seifim. The Seder, the performance of the hakafos that we make around the Bimah by Hoshanos on Sukkos, Ubay Gimel Seifim, and here we have 3 Seifim. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph, Noihagim laha'alois Sefer Torah al habima. We have a minhag to place a Sefer Torah. I'm translating the Mechaber right now, literally. We have a minhag to bring up a Sefer Torah al habima. The Ramah puts in the word in parentheses here, Bimah. I don't know what it would say without the parentheses, because the words of the Mechaber are Nayagim laha'aloi Sefer Torah al, unless the al and the Bimah really were both supposed to be placed in parentheses. I'm not sure. But in any case, the Mechaber says we bring a Sefer Torah to the Bimah, ula hakifa, and then we make a hakafa around the Bimah and the Sefer Torah, pam achas, one time, b'chol yom, on each day. So this is the minhag that we know that we have on Sukkos. Every day by davening, we make one hakafa around the Bimah by Hoshanos. Continues the Mechaber, ubashvi, and on the 7th day, makifim oisa sheva pa'amim, we go around the Bimah 7 times. That's on Hoshana Rabbah. And we do this zecher lamigdash, as a zecher, as a remembrance for what was done in the Beis HaMikdash. And for the moment, for the sake of continuity, I'm going to skip the words of the Ramah, and let's go down to the 3rd line here on Kuf Lamed Beis Amid Beis, and continue the sentence of the Mechaber. So this is done zecher lamigdash shahayu makifim es hamizbeach, where they would make hakafos around the mizbeach in the Beis HaMikdash. So let's just remind ourselves. In the Beis HaMikdash on Sukkos, the Kohanim, all 7 days of Sukkos, and we learned in Masechta Sukkah that this was a mitzvah da'araisa. All of the 7 days of Sukkos, they would take aravos, they would stand aravos up around the mizbeach, and they would make a hakafa, would make one hakafa around the mizbeach, and they would say, Ana Hashem Hoshiana. There's a machlokes whether they would hold the lulav and esrig, or they would hold aravos when they made this hakafa. And then on Hoshana Rabbah, on the 7th day of Sukkos, they would make 7 hakafos around the mizbeach. So this is what was done in the Beis HaMikdash, and this was performed by the Kohanim. It was not done outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Nowadays, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. The Chazal wa Mesakin, as a Zeichel HaMikdash, we do Hoshanos all 7 days of Sukkos. And what we do is, on each of the first 6 days of Sukkos, we go around the Bimah once. And on Hoshana Rabbah, on the 7th day of Sukkos, we go around the Bimah 7 times. Now, all of the 7 days of Yom Tov, we do this holding the Daled Minim, holding the Lulav and the Esrik. According to the Mandi Amar and the Gemara in Sukkah, that the Kohanim made the hakafos holding the Daled Minim, then the reason we do it holding the Daled Minim is again Zeichel HaMikdash. According to the Mandi Amar in the Gemara in Sukkah, that the Kohanim made the hakafos holding the aravos, then the reason we go around holding the Daled Minim is to show the chavivos hamitzvah, the chavivos that we have for the mitzvah of Daled Minim. We hold the Daled Minim when we go around by Hoshanos. Now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah back at Kuf Lamed Beis Amid Aleph. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Aleph. Sefer Torah al habima ula hakifa. The Mechaber together with the Ramah said that we bring a Sefer Torah to the Bimah and we go around the Bimah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, and I want to make an interesting point here with this Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, Shehi nisheres lanu b'makayim mizbeach, because it is left for us in the place of the Mizbeach. Now, what does the word shehi refer to? There are 2 nouns that we had here in the sentence of the Mechaber together with the Ramah. It says, Noihagim lahalois Sefer Torah. So the Sefer Torah is one object. Al habima, the bima, is another object. The Mishnah Berurah here says, shehi, because it, nisheres, is left for us, lanu, b'mokayim hamizbeach, in the place of the mizbeach. Is this a reference to the bima, or is this a reference to the Sefer Torah? And we're going to see that this is going to make an afgemina lahalacha later on in this siman. Now, to find the answer, I looked up the Bir Agra, because if you take a look here in the Sharet Tzion, Ois Katan Aleph, the Chavetz Chaim is bringing this down from the Gra. So I took out a Shulchan Aruch and I looked up the Bir Agra to see what the Bir Agra says. Let's pull out my Shulchan Aruch here and I'll read it to you. No, that's not Shulchan Aruch. That's the Minchas Chinuch. Here's the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. So, says the Bir Agra, so the Gra brings down Yerushalmi. No, not that Gra. Where is it? Here it is. Says the Gra, Umakifen es ha-sefer Torah. We make hakafos around the Sefer Torah, shehi nisheres lanu b'makayim hamizbeach. Because the Sefer Torah is what is left for us in place of the mizbeach. So the lesson that I want to bring out over here, and this is a lesson that was taught to me very early on in my yeshiva career, by my brother, Yosef Asher, when I was learning with him Night Seder when I was in 9th grade, and Taisvis brought down a Gemara. Actually, it was a Gemara brought down a pasuk, and my brother Yosef Asher told me, he said, why don't you look up the pasuk? So I took out a Chumash and I looked up the pasuk, and much to my surprise, I found out that that pasuk did not exist. And my brother explained to me that the Gemara is referring to the pasuk, but what the Gemara does is, it takes words from two different psukim and puts them together. And Yosef Asher taught me then, he said, let this be a lesson for you for your entire learning career. Whenever the Gemara brings down something, whenever the Rishonim bring down something, whenever the Achronim bring down the word of a Rishon, look it up. Because you never know what you'll learn from actually looking at the source. So here, where we have an ambiguous Mishnah Berurah, and we're not sure what the Mishnah Berurah is referring to when he says that there is something that takes the place of the Mizbeach. Is it the Sefer Torah or is it the Bimah? We look at the Bir Agra at the source, and we can see it's the Sefer Torah that's Nisheres Lanu B'Makam HaMizbeach, and we'll see later on how this makes an afgemina lahalacha. But in any case, the Chavetz Chaim says that the Sefer Torah is left over for us in the place of the Mizbeach, Kedeisa b'Gemara, like the Gemara says in Mesechus Megillah, Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, Shehei Sheva Kadosh Baruch Hu LaAvraham Avinu, that the Rebbeinu Shalom responded to Avram Avinu, and he told him, Shekol Zman Shiyu Karen Banecha Lofanai B'Seder HaKarbonos, as long as Klal Yisrael will read the Seder HaKarbonos from the Sefer Torah, Ma'ala Ani Aleihen Ki'ilu Makriven Lofanai, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, the act of Klal Yisrael reading the Sidrei HaKarbonos from the Sefer Torah will stand in the place of actually bringing the Karbonos. This was a conversation that Avram Avinu had with the Rebbeinu Shalom at the Bris Bein Habsarim. When the Rebbeinu Shalom made the Bris Bein Habsarim together with Avram Avinu took behemoths, he took animals, and he set them aside basically as Karbonos. And the Rebbeinu Shalom told him it is the Sukkos of the Karbonos that will maintain Klal Yisrael l'netzach nitzachim. So Avram Avinu asked, but what will be when Klal Yisrael doesn't have a Beis Hamikdash? And that's, the Rebbeinu Shalom responded to that question, and he said, even when they don't have a Beis Hamikdash, when they will read the Sidra HaKarbonos from the Sefer Torah, that will stand them instead of the actual bringing of the Karbonos. So so far we have over here from the Mechaber and the Ramah that there's a minhag on Sukkos. We take out a Sefer Torah. Now, the words of the Mechaber together with the Ramah sound like we take the Sefer Torah and we place it on the Bimah. Minhagim lahaloi Sefer Torah al habima. And indeed, this seems to be taken from the Lavush. And in the Lavush, it also sounds like we're placing the Sefer Torah on the Bimah. Now, we know that the minhag is that somebody actually holds the Sefer Torah. The Pri Megadim brings down the Lavush, and the Pri Megadim says, no, you should not just place the Sefer Torah on the Bimah. Somebody should hold the Sefer Torah at the Bimah. Okay, so now we have established the minhag of Hoshanos, that somebody takes out a Sefer Torah, brings it to the Bimah, and on the first 6 days of Yom Tov, we make one hakafa around the Bimah, and we say Hoshanos. On Hoshana Rabbah, we make 7 hakafos around the Bimah, and we say Hoshanos, and this was done as a zeicher limigdash, as a remembrance of what the Kohanim did when they went around the Mizbeach and they said, Ana Hashem Hoshiana in the Beis HaMikdash. The first 6 days they went around the Mizbeach once. On the 7th day, they went around the Mizbeach 7 times. Now, we know that there are 2 very different minhagim of when we do Hoshanos by davening. We have the minhag that has become known as the minhag Ashkenaz, which is to do Hoshanos after Musaf, and then there's the minhag that has become known as the minhag Sfard, which is to do the hakafos of Hoshanos right after Hallel. So there's a very nice Dirshu footnote here, Dirshu footnote number 1. V'ha'im yesh loymar as Hoshanos ulahakev es habima acharei hahallel, oishema acharei Musaf. As to the question of whether Hoshanos should be performed after Hallel like minhag Sfard or after Musaf like minhag Ashkenaz, B'Torah Mavur in the Torah it's brought down Shemakifen es habima va'imrim es Hoshanos la'achar Musaf. The Torah brings down like the minhag Ashkenaz to do it at the end of davening after Musaf. Me'idach, on the other hand, Hashari Tshuva Kasav, the Shari Tshuva writes, Sheminig Yerushalayim loymer es Hoshanos ulahakev es habima acharei Hallel. The Shari Tshuva brings down that the minhag Yerushalayim was to do this after Hallel. Hu minhag Vatikin, and he says that this was the minhag of the Vatikin. Ubeluach Eretz Yisrael kasav shehaminhag loymer as Hoshanos ulahakev es habima achar Musaf. The Luach Eretz Yisrael says that the minhag was after Musaf. V'hoisif, but it adds sheyesh b'kayma she'oisam akar lacharei hahallel, that there were places that did it after Hallel. So we see so far over here, we see these different minhagim. We have the Torah brings down after Musaf. Shari Tshuva brings down a minhag Yerushalayim to do it after Hallel. V'abikura Yaakov hichiach. The Bikura Yaakov proves shebemikdash hayu hahakafos kaidem Musaf. The Bikura Yaakov proves that in the Beis HaMikdash, the Hoshanos were actually done before they brought the Karban Musaf. Ach siem, however, he concludes she'ein biyadeinu l'shanoi shum minhag, that we shouldn't change the minhag. However the minhag is, that's what we should do. The Aruch HaShulchan brings down Kasav she'minhag b'nei Ashkenaz la'omer acharei Musaf. The minhag Ashkenaz is to do it after Musaf. Well, minhag b'nei Sfarad la'omer acharei Hallel, and the minhag Sfarad is to do it after Hallel. The Kasav HaKafachayim she'mavur b'shar HaKavonos she'yesh lomer Hoshanos dafka acharei Hallel. Kafachayim says you should do it after Hallel. V'chein oisem ha'nohagim al pi ha'arizal, and those who follow the minhag of the Ari also do it right after Hallel. Okay, so again, we see different minhagim. Well, minhag HaChazon Ish, interestingly enough, the minhag of the Chazon Ish was hayaloymer as Hoshanos acharei Hallel. Chazon Ish said Hoshanos after Hallel. Chutz mi Shabbos v'Hoshana Rabbah, with the exception of on Shabbos and on Hoshana Rabbah, shehayu oimron acharei Musaf on Hoshana Rabbah, and on Shabbos he would do it after Musaf. Okay, now we have a very interesting tshuva from the Rishiva Zatzal in the Igros. Shabbos the tshuva Sigris Moshe Kasav, he gives 2 very interesting, and this is so interesting to me because this is typical of Rav Moshe Zecher Tzaddik V'Kadosh L'Varacha, a very halachic analysis of the situation. Shabbos the tshuva Sigris Moshe Kasav, Shemeyikar Adin yesh la'omer achar kriyas HaTorah u'musaf. Me'ikar adin, based on straight technical halacha, it would seem that it's most appropriate to say Hoshanos later than kriyas HaTorah and later than musaf. Why? Kevet sheshneim hein chiyuv. Because kriyas HaTorah and tfilas musaf are chiyuvim. Those are obligations. You must do them. Va'amiras hoshanos hurak minhag. As far as hoshanos is only a minhag. So what comes first? A chiyuv or a minhag? Of course, a chiyuv comes first. So if you have three things in front of you, you have kriyas HaTorah, you have musaf, and you have hoshanos. Kriyas HaTorah is a chiyuv, musaf is a chiyuv, hoshanos is only a minhag. Do hoshanos last. Do it after musaf. Ach mitzad sheni. However, the Rishiva Zatzal does give the flip side. He says, Ach mitzad sheni yesh tam gadol lo be'eretz hoshanos biyad acharei halal. There is a very strong argument for Taka saying the hoshanos right after halal. You already picked up the daled minim, you made a bracha on them right before halal, and you used them for the nanuim and for amiras halal. Yigmaru games mitzvahs amiras hoshanos abalulav. It would be very appropriate now to continue with hoshanos where you still need the daled minim. She'im yanichu es alulav, because if you put down the daled minim now after halal, nirik tzas kim avirin ala mitzvahs. We know that there's a golden rule, ein ma'avirin ala mitzvahs. We don't pass over mitzvahs. So if you're already holding the daled minim, and there's another mitzvah to do with the daled minim, and instead of performing that mitzvah, you take the daled minim and you put them down, that looks a little too much like ma'avirin al ha-mitzvahs. You have a mitzvah to do, you're not doing it. Instead, you're putting down the daled minim, you're going on to something else. So it's very interesting, and the reason I wanted to read this Dirshu footnote inside is because this is something that's so well known. You know, I daven here in the yeshiva by me. Yeshiva davens Ashkenaz. I grew up davening Sfard. And I always make a joke. When we come to hoshanos, I always, as I'm putting my daled minim down, I'll say, boy, this is one thing that Nusach Sfard definitely got right. I mean, we're holding the daled minim. We should put them down now. So these are two very widespread minhagim. And here you have the background, you have all these different shitas, and lastly you had this beautiful tshuva from the Rishiva Zatzal that shows you the justification for each one of the minhagim. Now I want to skip later in this footnote, skip the next two paragraphs, so to the last paragraph on the bottom of the next column. A very interesting question. What do you do if you don't have a Sefer Torah? Says the Dirshu footnote here, let's say there is no Sefer Torah, and it's time for hoshanos. Kasav B'Kurei Yaakov, the B'Kurei Yaakov writes, Shalo yakifu klal. You don't make hakafos. You don't have a Sefer Torah, you don't make hakafos. V'chein im mispal b'yechidus. And so too, if you're davening b'yechidus, you aren't able to go to shul, you're davening at home. Kasav Eishal Avram, he says, Shalo yakif, that you should not make hakafos. Shahakafos shayeches rak b'tzibur. Because he says, the Eishal Avram says that the concept of hakafos is only b'tzibur. Now this is why I told you that looking up that bir hakra seems to make an afkamina lahalacha. Because we saw that the reason we make hakafos is because in the Beis Hamikdash they made hakafos around the Mizbeach. And the Sefer Torah is nisheres lanu b'makom ha-Mizbeach. It's the Sefer Torah that takes the place of the Mizbeach. Now we can understand why if you don't have a Sefer Torah, you don't make hakafos. Because what are you doing? You're not going around something that stands in the place of the Mizbeach. It's only the Sefer Torah that stands in the place of the Mizbeach, not the Bimah. However, Me'idach continues the footnote here. Ha-Ben Ish Chai, the Ben Ish Chai Kasav, he writes, She'efshar lahakafos ha-Bimah gam kishe'ein Sefer Torah. The Ben Ish Chai says it does make sense to make hakafos around the Bimah, even if you have no Sefer Torah. V'hoisif, and he goes even further and he adds, Shalachein, therefore, chayla she'ena yachal lahakafos ha-Bimah bebeis hakneses, a chayla, somebody who's ill, who cannot go around the Bimah, or maybe he's even davening at home, yaniach kisei bebeisai, he should set up a chair in his house, v'yaniach alav tanach, he should put a tanach on the chair, v'yakiv svivai, and go around it, kidei shelo levatel mitzvahs hakafa, so that he should not just totally be mevatel the mitzvah of hakafa of hoshanos. V'hoisev hakafa chayim, and the kafa chayim adds, shem yesh lo shulchan, if he has a table, yakiv svivai, he should go around the table, ki nechshav k'may teva, v'ra u're'ei ma shekasavdu lahalon. Now, I was thinking, we have this machlokes over here We have the Bikur Yaakov, we have the Ben Ish Chai. So the Bikur Yaakov, I gave a very simple explanation for. The Bikur Yaakov says, don't make hakafos if you have no Sefer Torah, because the Sefer Torah is what's b'makam hamizbeach, not the Bimah. But the Ben Ish Chai says, go around even the Bimah without the Sefer Torah. Then I remembered a halacha that we learned when we were learning Hilchas Shofros. And that is, why do we blow shofar by the Bimah? We blow shofar by the Bimah because when we blow shofar, we want to also pick up the Sukkos of the Torah. So the Bimah is where we lay in the Sefer Torah. We want to kind of use the Sukkos of Torah together with the Sukkos of shofar, so we blow from the Bimah. So you see that the Bimah is shaykh to the Sukkos of Torah. So it could be that the Ben Ish Chai is saying, even if it's the Sefer Torah that's b'makam hamizbeach, but not the Bimah, by going around the Bimah, we are also bringing up the Sukkos of the Torah, which is for us b'makam hamizbeach. Now, also very, very nice, I saw in the Berurah, you know what, we're not up to that yet. Let's take a look now. I'm going to do Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Bays, because we already read those words in the Mechaber before we go back to the Ramah. So the Mechaber said that we go around the Bimah with the Sefer Torah once, the first 6 days, and on the 7th day we go around 7 times. Shahayu Makifet Esam Mizbeach. This is a zecher to what was done in the Beis Hamikdash, where they went around the Mizbeach. Ois Cotton Bays on Kuflamed Bays, Amid Bays, says the Mishnah Berurah, Shayu Makifet Esam Mizbeach, Gam Kein B'chol Yom Pamachas Ubashvi Sheva Pa'amim. This is what they did in the Beis Hamikdash. They went around 1 time on the first 6 days, and they went around 7 times on Hoshana Rabbah. Now, before we go to the Ramah, let's go to Dirshu footnote number 2, to the 3rd paragraph over here, because this is also a very interesting question that comes up by Hoshanos. You see, by Hoshanos, a lot of people are kind of mechanically challenged. You have to hold the lulav, the esrig, and you need some kind of a matzah or a sitter for the Hoshanos. That many people know Hoshanos Palpeh. So he brings up the question over here of how to properly hold the Daled Minim. Now, we learned a halacha earlier that when you're yotze the mitzvah of the Daled Minim, you're supposed to hold the lulav bundle in your right hand. That gets kedima over the esrig, because the lulav bundle is 3 mitzvahs. The esrig is only 1 mitzvah, so the esrig goes in your left hand. But we said you're not supposed to hold the lulav bundle and the esrig in one hand. Why? Because the esrig is supposed to be apart from the lulav bundle, because the pasuk says ulakachtem lochem pri eitz hadar. You take the esrig, the pri eitz hadar, and then you take ve anaf eitz avos ve kapos tamarim ve anaf eitz avos ve arve nachal. So the lulav goes together with the anaf eitz avos, the hadassim. There's a vav over there, and with the aravos, there's a vav over there. But the pri eitz hadar, the esrig, is kept separate. And we even saw a shita that says if you were to hold the esrig bundle and the lulav bundle and the esrig in the same hand, when you make the bracha to be yotze the mitzvah, we had one shita that said you're not even yotze the mitzvah. So certainly when you go to be yotze the mitzvah, you are not supposed to hold them in one hand. We also saw that by Hallel, when you make the nanuim, you're not supposed to hold them in one hand. You're supposed to hold the lulav bundle in the right, the esrig in the left. How about by Hoshanos? By Hoshanos, a lot of people want to hold the lulav together with the esrig in one hand and the matzah in the other hand. Is that a problem? So here in the footnote, they discuss this. It says over here, when you find yourself holding the lulav bundle and the esrig when you're making the hakafos of Hoshanos, Kasva Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Shulchan Aruch Harav writes, Ve'achayim u'bracha, and the Sefer Chayim u'bracha, ve'elef hamagein, sheyesh lecha es halulav biyamin, that you should hold the lulav bundle in your right hand, ve'esa esrig b'smail, and you should hold the esrig in your left hand, the same way we do by Hallel, and the same way we do when we make the bracha to be yotze the mitzvah. Va'aben Ish Chai kasav, the Ben Ish Chai writes, Shetoyim elu she'oitzim es halulav ha'esrik biyad achas. The Ben Ish Chai writes that it's a big mistake, those who try to hold the lulav and the esrik together in one hand by Hoshanos. V'chein hoira goyin Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal wrote the same way, al pi divrei Mishnah Berurah el, based on the Mishnah Berurah that we learned earlier, that says that you're not supposed to hold the lulav bundle and the esrig in the same hand. Me'idach, on the other hand, Hayafal Alev Kasav Shaminik Shaloichi B'Shasa Hakafa as a lulav as a esrig biyad yamin. The minhag that people have that they hold the lulav bundle and the esrig in the right hand, v'as a siddur biyad smoil and a siddur or a machzer in the left hand. He writes that that's okay, that's a minhag. The minhag is to do it that way. That's what the Sefer Yafal Alev writes. The Bekurei Yaakov Kasav, the Bekurei Yaakov writes, B'Shem Shalos Teshuvas Ginas Vradim, Shekach minhag, that is the minhag. But the Bekurei Yaakov says that it would be better not to. However, the Noyag, the Stipler Goyen, was also Noyag to hold them in one hand. The Hara Goyen, Rabbi Yosef Shalom al Yashiv Zatzal, Rabbi Yashiv held them in one hand, and he said, you could hold the lulav and the esrik in one hand, and you could hold the siddur in the other hand. So again, we seem to have justification for both ways of doing this. Certainly it would seem that you should not be moicha to somebody who's holding the lulav and the esrig in one hand and the machzer in the other hand. In the last paragraph here, in the footnote, he just brings down here, people say the Hoshanos, so you have the paragraph that you say while you're going around the Bimah, then you say Aniva HaYoshiana, then you have the beautiful paragraph of Kahishata Elim Belud Imach, and I would urge people before Sukkos to take out one of the plethora of different options of English machzorim and English sidurim that there are nowadays, and learn the taich of the Hoshanos. They're beautiful piyutim, and they're not very difficult. Know what it is that you're saying. But people have different minhagim when they put down the lulav and esrig by Hoshanos. He brings down that there's an inyan to hold them until after the end of Kaddish, after Hoshanos. It shouldn't look that we're trying to get the Daled Minim out of our hands quickly. Okay, now with that, let's go to the top line in the Shulchan Aruch on Kuf Lamed Beis, and let's go to the words of the Ramah. The Ramah brings down a very interesting minhag. Hagah, Umoitziim Shiva Sifrei Torah al Habima B'Yom Shvi. The Ramah brings down one minhag. There was one minhag to bring 7 Sifrei Torah out to the Bimah on Hoshana Rabbah. The rest of Yom Tov, you take out 1 Sefer Torah, but on Hoshana Rabbah, he says you take out 7. V'yesh b'kaimos, then he brings down another minhag. There are places Shabbatzian Kol Sifrei Torah Shabahechel, where they take out all the Sifrei Torah and bring them to the Bimah on Hoshana Rabbah. V'hachi noyagin b'medinos elu, and the Ramah says v'hachi noyagin, and that's the minhag that we have b'medinos elu in these regions. Now there's no Mishnah Berurah on this Ramah, but I found a very nice Bir Hagra. See, while I was looking up the other Bir Hagra, I found another interesting Bir Hagra on this Ramah. The Gra brings down a Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says, the Yerushalmi Amrinan, because in the Yerushalmi it says, Shaha hakafos zecher liyerichai, because the hakafos around the Mizbeach in the Beis HaMikdash, and by extension the hakafos that we make around the Bimah that are a zecher l'mikdash, were a zecher for the conquering of the city of Yerichai by Yehoshua and Klal Yisrael when they came in to conquer Eretz Yisrael. And how is it a zecher for that? Where it's brought down in Nach that Klal Yisrael surrounded for 6 days. Every day Klal Yisrael made a hakafa around the city of Yerichai, and 7 kaihanim blew shofar. Then on the 7th day, they made 7 hakafos around Yerichai, and everybody, not just 7 kaihanim, everybody blew shofar, and then the walls of Yerichai sank into the ground, and they conquered Yerichai. So like the Gra says here, Sha'hakafos zeichel Yerichai, B'yom Zayin Zayin Pa'amim. On the seventh day, they encircled the city of Yericho 7 times. V'sheishes Yamim Pamachas. And for the first 6 days, they encircled the city once. V'oisin Zecher L'Shiva Shofaros. And we bring out 7 Sifrei Torah on the 7th day, on Hoshana Rabbah, as a zecher to the 7 shofaros that the Kohanim blew during the first 6 days. Okay. So, basically what comes out then is like this. Why do we make the hakafos around the Mizbeach and around the Bimah? Why do we make one hakafa on the first 6 days? Because that's what Klal Yisrael did for the first 6 days of the conquering of Yericho. They made one hakafa around the city. But on Hoshana Rabbah, we go around 7 times, because on the 7th day, they made 7 hakafos around the city of Yericho. The Ramah that brings down a minhag that on Hoshana Rabbah they brought 7 Sifrei Torah to the Bimah. The 7 Sifrei Torah were a zecher to the 7 shofaros that 7 Kohanim blew on the first 6 days. The minhag that the Ramah brings down that in some places they bring out all the Sifrei Torah is because on the 7th day, everybody blew shofar. It wasn't only 7 shofaros, it was a vast multitude of shofaros. Now, what does this have to do with Sukkos? Why is it that on Sukkos and on Hoshana Rabbah we're making a zecher to the conquering of Yericho? So I did see brought down that we know that on Sukkos we have a very interesting set of karbonos. We have the parei hachag, the parim that we bring as part of the musaf, and they go down 1 in each day. But the total of the parim that we bring is 70, and that's a remez to the conquering of the Shivim Umay Sa'olam, the 70 nations of the world, that the Klal Yisrael will eventually conquer them all. So on Sukkos, so again, I forgot. What does this have to do with Sukkos? Since the Parei Achag since the Parei Achag that we bring on Sukkos are a zecher to the fact that Klal Yisrael will conquer the Shivim Umay Sa'olam. So the first conquering that we did was the city of Yericho. We do this minhag of Hoshanos as a remembrance for the conquering of Yericho. Okay, so now we did the Ramah, we did the Mechaber. Now we have to finish off the Mechaber here in Sif Aleph. Says the Mechaber, V'ha'akafos litzad yamin. When we make the hakafos, we always turn to the right. As we go around the Bimah, we go around to the right. What does that mean? So let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah. I made a little chart. As I always tell you, I'm not very artistic. I'm artistically challenged. So we'll see. I'll try to hold it up in front of the camera and see if it's worth anything. But here's what I want you to imagine. Okay? You're standing in shul. Now, we are west of Eretz Yisrael. Since we are west of Eretz Yisrael, when we daven, we're supposed to face the Mizrach. We're supposed to face east towards Eretz Yisrael. So I want you to imagine that you're standing in your shul and you're facing the Aron HaKodesh, and the Aron HaKodesh is to the Mizrach. The Aron HaKodesh is to your east. Okay? So you are facing east. When you are standing and facing the front of the shul, you're facing east, north is to your left, south is to your right, and west is behind you. Now, it comes time for Hoshanos. Somebody goes up to the Aron HaKodesh, they open the Aron HaKodesh, they take out a Sefer Torah. Interestingly enough, it's not brought down here, but our minhag is that we open the Aron HaKodesh, we take out a Sefer Torah, we leave the Aron HaKodesh opened. We can see a source for that in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. So somebody goes up to the Aron, opens the Aron, takes out a Sefer Torah, brings the Sefer Torah to the Bimah. Now the Sefer Torah is by the Bimah, and we are going to make hakafos around the Sefer Torah by the Bimah. So the truth is that for the congregation that is standing inside of shul, the point of reference in the shul, the most kind of exalted point in the shul right now is the Bimah, where the Sefer Torah is, where we are about to go around the Sefer Torah. Therefore, the tzibur turns to the Bimah. Now, I'm not telling you that practically speaking, when we start Hoshanos, we should turn to the Bimah. Because first, the Chazan is going to say, Hoshana lemancha Elokeinu Hoshana. And we're facing the Aron HaKodesh that's open while we're mispal. But before we go to make hakafos, we are all going to turn around and face the Bimah. Now, if you're standing in front of the Bimah and you turn around to face the Bimah, guess what? Now in front of you is the west, and since you're facing west, to your right is north. Oh, since to your right is north, so now you have to turn in a northward direction, because you have to turn to your right. So you're facing the back. You have to go towards your north. Now, to a lot of people, when they picture this, again, I'm asking you to picture yourself standing in your shul, they say, but wait a second. You're telling me, Rabbi Weiss, that I'm standing over here and I'm facing west, so north is to my right. Now, the Bimah is over here. I'm going to go around the Bimah, but doesn't that mean that I'm going to make a left turn? No, you're not making a left turn. The reason why you're not making a left turn is because we imagine that you're always standing with your face to the Bimah. Even though practically speaking, when you do it, you walk like this, you walk straight ahead, and the Bimah might be to your side. But again, the Bimah is the point of reference. So we always imagine as if the Bimah is central, and even when you're walking away from the Bimah, your face is not pointing away from the Bimah. It's as if you're facing the Bimah. Now, if you're facing the Bimah and you go around and you go north, west, south, east, you're making a circle. It's your right arm that is always going to be leading as you go around. So I don't know how this will work well on the camera, but you see, this is the picture that I made over here. Aron HaKodesh is in the Mizrach. Here's the Bimah down here. Here's a person standing in the shul. If he turns around and he's facing the Bimah, right, north is going to be to his right. North is going to be to his right. So when he goes around, his right arm is always going to be leading as he goes north, west, south, and then back to east. He's always going to be leading with his right arm. I hope that was helpful. I hope that was clear. Now let's learn it here in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says in Ois Katan Gimel, Ulefisha Sefer Torah ala Bimah. The Sefer Torah is by the Bimah. So that becomes the point of reference. V'hatzibur Anshe Mizrach. The Tzibur, who the Mishnah Berurah is calling Anshe Mizrach, they are standing to the Mizrach of the Bimah. They're standing east of the Bimah. V'hatzibur Anshe Mizrach. Tzrichen lahafoich paneim. Klape Sefer Torah, Koidem She'aschilu Lahakif. They're going to have to turn around and face the Bimah. Va'oz memela havitzafain yamin shalahem. So now north is going to be to their right. V'sidron b'hakafa. So now the order that they should go around and make the hakafos is hutzafain. First they should go to the north. Then Ma'ariv, then they should go to the west. Then Darim, then to the south. And then back around to the Mizrach. And if they would be facing the Bimah, they would always be leading with their right arm. And this is similar to the Mizbeach. I want you to understand. If you imagine the Mizbeach, when the Kohen went up the Kevish, when the Kohen went up the ramp to go up to the Mizbeach, he was facing north. Because remember, the Kachik Kachim was actually in the Ma'ariv. The Kachik Kachim was in the west. East was behind. South was to the left. The Kevish, the ramp to go up to the Mizbeach, was pointing to the left. So the Kohen, when he went up the Kevish, he was going from the Darim, from the south, up to the Mizbeach facing north. Now when he got up to the Sovev, when he got up to the ledge that went around the Mizbeach, the Chazal say, Kol pina sha'atapaina eina paina ela liyamin. He had to go to the right. So when he went up to the Kevish and he had to make a circle around the Mizbeach, right? He went up to the Kevish, he led with his right arm, so he went to the right, started going around. Now by the next corner, he has to turn. Now you might say, but Rabbi Weiss, he's making a left. No, he's not making a left. The reason he's not making a left is he's only making a left if you imagine that as he walks along the south of the Mizbeach to get to the east of the Mizbeach, he's facing east. If he's facing east and then he turns, if he's facing east and then he turns to go to the north, you would think he's making a left. But he's not, because he's not facing east. He's facing the Mizbeach. He's always facing the Mizbeach as he goes along. So every turn that he makes, he always leads with his right side. Okay. Now, how about the Chazan? This all works for the Tzibur. However, it says the Chavetz Chaim, V'achazan she'oimen neged ha'heichel. Now, the Chazan, you might have a question. The Chazan's point of reference is not the Bimah, because the Chazan is always seen as standing in front of the Aron Kodesh. All of his tefillas are directed to the Aron HaKodesh. So the Chazan, his point of reference is the Aron HaKodesh. He's facing east. He's not facing west. You would think that maybe he has to go in the other direction. The Tzibur, we said, they're facing west. So north is to their right. But the Chazan is facing east. South is to his right. So should the Tzibur go in the opposite? Should the Chazan go in the opposite direction of the Tzibur? Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. He can't turn around to face the same direction as the Tzibur because he can't turn away from the Aron. But nevertheless, he still has to go around to the north first, together with the rest of the Tzibur, even though really it comes out that he's going to his left, he's leading with his left, because he started off facing east, as opposed to everybody else who started off facing west, but he has to do the same as the Tzibur. There's an interesting Dirshu footnote here, number 4, but we're already running a little bit long, and I want to at least finish this Siman, so we're going to hold it off for the moment. Okay, now we just have to finish off Sif Aleph, the words of the Ramah. Says the Ramah, Ubishabis ein makifim, on Shabbos we don't make hakafos of Hoshanos, ve'ein moitziin Sefer Torah ala Bimah, and we do not bring a Sefer Torah to the Bimah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, is cut daled, Ubishabis ein makifim, on Shabbos we don't make hakafos, levi shagam b'mikdash lo hayu noitlen arava b'Shabbos, because the Kohanim did not perform aravas in the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos. When one of the days of Yom Tov was Shabbos, they didn't do the minhag of hakafos and of aravas in the Beis HaMikdash, even though it was a mitzvah daraisa. The Chazal were masakin not to do it. Why? Because we know that the Chazal were masakin that you don't take a lulav and esrog on Shabbos, and the reason they made that takana is because they were afraid Shema Yavi Renu Dalad Amis Berurah Sarabim, you might come to take the Dalad Minim outside in Rishos Sarabim and carry it on Shabbos. So the Chazal were masakin and not to take the Dalad Minim on Shabbos, even if the first day of Yom Tov is on Shabbos, and even in the Beis HaMikdash where it's a mitzvah daraisa. And therefore, they were masakin that you don't do aravas on Shabbos either, even though there really was no chash of Shema Yavirenu Dalad Amis Berurah Sarabim, because Klal Yisrael didn't do aravas in the Beis HaMikdash. It was the Kohanim, and it was Shluchei Bezdin. So on them, we didn't really have a chash of Shema Yavirenu, but the Chazal did not want to make the minhag of arava, or even the mitzvah daraisa of arava, they didn't want to make it more chashiv than the dalad minim. So once they were masakin that you don't do the dalad minim on Shabbos, together with that came a takana that you don't do aravas on Shabbos. The chol shekei lefi minhagenu, and certainly according to our minhag, shanu makifin belulav, we make the hakafos of Hoshanos holding the dalad minim, ein alulav nito b'Shabbos. We know that we never take the dalad minim, the lulav and the esrog on Shabbos, so we certainly do not do Hoshanos on Shabbos, or at least the hakafos of Hoshanos. The ein moitziin Sefer Torah is cut in hay, kevin de ein makifin. Since we don't make hakafos, we don't take out a Sefer Torah. Ala Bimah, rak paiskin Aron HaKodesh, but we do open Aron HaKodesh on Shabbos, v'oimrim Hoshanos, and we say Hoshanos in our place, ukidalakameh, like we're going to see later on. Let's go to Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber, Noihagim lahakif af mi she'en loy lulav. The minhag was to make hakafos, this is the Mechaber's minhag, to make hakafos by Hoshanos, even somebody who does not have dalad minim. However, the Ramah says, v'yesh omrim shemi she'en loy lulav einoi makif. There's a Yesh Omrim that says that if you don't have Daled Minim, you do not make hakafos v'chein noyagin, and the Ramah says that is indeed the minhag. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Cotton Zion, Einay Makif, Ubiyam Shvi, Im Ein Lulav Be'ir. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if on Hoshana Rabbah nobody in the city has Daled Minim, Yakifu Ba'arava, then you make hakafos, interestingly enough, with aravas, with the Hoshanos. Ice Cotton, we didn't do this yet, okay. Let's finish off Siv Beis in the Ramah. Very interesting minhag the Ramah brings down. Ubiyam Shvi, on day 7, on Hoshana Rabbah, Noitlin ha'arava im halulav lahakif. The minhag of the Ramah, he brings down that on Hoshana Rabbah, you take the Hoshanos together with the Daled Minim, and you make hakafos with the Daled Minim and the Hoshanos. So says the Ramah over here. Let's finish off the Sif. Says the Ramah, Misha Erolei Evel B'chag, if Nebuch Le'aleinu, somebody suffers the loss of a loved one on Yom Tov and he's an Avelus, Einay Makif, he does not make hakafos. V'chein Avel Kol Shtei Masar Chodesh Al Ave V'imai, so too somebody who is an Avelus for a parent, all the entire year of Avelus, he does not make hakafos by Hoshanos V'chein Nagu, and that is the minhag. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Cotton Ches. The Ramah says, on Hoshana Rabbah, Noitlin ha'arava im alulav, you go around by hakafos with the Hoshanos and the Daled Minim. However, the Mishnah Berurah refers us later on to Siman Tafresh Samach Daled in the Ramah, where the Ramah says, im halulav klal. It's much better to never take the Hoshanos at the same time together with the Daled Minim, and we're going to see over there in Siman Tafresh Samach Daled that the reason for that is we always want to show that the mitzvah of Daled Minim and the mitzvah of Aravas are two separate mitzvahs, so we don't hold them together. V'chein kasev b'shem ha'arizal, and so writes the Ari, shaloi lechabram klal im alulav, that we should never take them together. Rather, achar kaddish tiskabel, one minhag the Chavetz Chaim brings down is that after kaddish, after Hoshanos, after we say tiskabel, oz kach biyodcha ha'arava, then you take the Hoshanos v'tachbon chamesh pa'amim b'karka, and you bang them 5 times on the ground. Ushla kasav, the Shla writes, and I think this is the more widespread minhag, kishemagia l'ta'ane emunim, that when we get up to the paragraph in Hoshanos of ta'ane emunim, oz maniach halulav, then we put the lulav down v'yikach ha'arava, and that's when we pick up the Hoshanos, and that's because the paragraph of Tana Amunim is where we start being mispal for Mayim, and we know that the Hoshanos are the one of the Daled Minim that are Gidal al Rov Mayim, they grow by a lot of water, so that's when we take the Hoshanos. Einay Makif, somebody who suffered the loss of a loved one does not make hakafos tiksivu smachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, because the pasuk instructs us to rejoice lifnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yamim, and the Gra says v'hu b'shas hakafa. The ikar simcha is when we make the hakafos, and therefore we cannot make an oval cannot make the hakafos. It would be inappropriate because you need to be b'simcha when you make the hakafos. Finally, let's go to Sif Gimel and let's finish this Siman. Says the Mechaber, Yesh mi she'omer, there are those that say she'ein omrim Hoshana b'Shabbos, not to say Hoshanos at all on Shabbos. Not only not to take out a Sefer Torah, not only not to make hakafos, but not to say Hoshanos at all on Shabbos. V'loi na'agu kain, however, that is not the minhag. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Cotton Yud she'ein omrim Hoshana b'Shabbos. There are those that say not to say Hoshanos at all on Shabbos. What's the reason for that minhag? Taimam, the rationale is mipnei tinoikos, because of the young children sheyishbu she'omrim b'Shabbos k'may b'chayil. They're going to witness that we say Hoshanos on Shabbos the same way we do during the week. V'yelchu gam litar lulav, and they might come to take hold of the Daled Minim on Shabbos. However, v'lo na'agu kain, that's not the minhag. The kevin she'ein makifin b'Shabbos, because since the tinoikos are going to see that we don't make hakafos, mispar lehem b'ma she'ein makifin, they're going to understand from the fact that we don't make hakafos, they're going to understand that we don't take the Daled Minim. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The Sukkos of limud HaTorah should be made in Agans Klal Yisrael. We should be zeicha, the Rabbeinu Shalom, in the Sukkos of limud HaTorah, the Rabbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's refuahs and Parnasa Sheduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeicha to see the Bias Kal Tzedek, B'meher v'yameinu, Amen. Be well.